that. I mean, I can't tell you how many occasions I've had students that have a funeral or a college visit,
Right.
a placement test, an orthodontist appointment. Those are very difficult for people to get. We always excuse it. We always excuse it. I could say, I mean, if it's someone getting dismissed because they have to go get their hair done, well, no, it's not an extenuating circumstance, you know?
Right.
And honestly, it crops up, I bet it doesn't crop up 10 times a year, if it even crops up that much. The idea is to encourage the attendance to school, and the idea that you have the obligation to your team 7 days a week, basically. That's the philosophy behind it.
Well, I do feel comfortable with you having the option to grant the waiver. I always go back to, though, if and you
I
ever
know,
leave
I know you
here
do, and I know
and we
Jerry
get
has the
someone
same
in
concern.
who's,
Yeah?
you know, unreasonable.
When Glenn leaves, we'll have to change the
That's
policy.
when,
Right,
that's
that's-
when you evaluate whether or not it's
Right,
working.
right.
You know, the question I would respectfully ask all of you is, do you ever get complaints from
No.
parents that their kid was not allowed to play on the game because they were out of school for a funeral?
I haven't.
Never. I mean, it's common sense. We
No
wouldn't do
parents
that.
call me about sports. I'm not.
You know,
No,
and it happens so seldom. And our attendance rate, I think part of the reason is our kids come to school.
Yeah.
I mean, our attendance rate is, you know, in the mid-90% attendance rate every day. I mean, it's incredibly high.
And I do know that last year, one of the issues we had that we fixed was the whole thing about getting dismissed from school. We added in a section where if the student comes back to school and
Correct.
is there for at least half the day.
Correct.
They can then
A
participate.
so-called leave and return.
Right.
And that's worked well this year.
Yeah,
Yep.
so,
And we've gone through Mrs. Lucci's very good on the phone with parents explaining it. And I think once you it's like a lot of policies, once you go through it for the first year, it's now inculcated in the mindset, and I think people understand it now, and it has not been an issue to my knowledge
and
this
the
year
party
either.
policy seems to be working.
And I think last year we made a change, I think it was actually at Jerry's suggestion, if that's what he said something to me, if that's what you're doing, can you just put the sentence in the book?
Right.
And we did it, and
We did.
I think it was that it did not automatically prevent a student. If
Right.
it was an unexcused tardy, that the student could still participate.
Right.
And when I said that we do that, he said, can you just put a statement in the book? And I believe that,
At your discretion.
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah, and I think Jerry was, yeah, okay.
And I think that settled that, the
Yes.
tardiness piece,
Yeah.
I think that was the issue.
Yeah.
Item 43, page 43, excuse me, on the extracurricular activities, I added in the three new clubs that you folks adopted this year, the French Club, the Adventure Club, and the Art Club, but I also thought, I get a lot of requests for, I mean, you know, I think we've added like 17 clubs over the years now, but a lot of times, the proposals come in very late, and it doesn't make sense to me that we implement something for like 4 months of the year. I would rather go through the process of the adoption in the fall for that school year, and if it gets to be after October 1st, then we would be looking at it for the rest of the year.
And
I
all
think
of these clubs are still active?
every single one of these clubs is still active, yes.
So if they're inactive for a year or 2 years, we take them off?
I did do that this year, yep, right.
It's-
The only one that's, you know, you could say is semi-inactive is the Student Advisory Council of the North Reading School Committee. That's the regional, under the Ed Reform Law, that's the regional school committee advisory group. We have had representation, it's an election that goes by the region, the North region, of North of Boston region. We have had students in the past, we do not have anybody now, but it doesn't mean that they can't be if they so choose to put their name up for election. And then, you just have all of the club definitions. I added a little description for the three new ones, the French Club, the Adventure Club, and the Art Club. I'm sorry, here's my page 41 and 42. They're out of order. Okay. I just put a section in on page 53, and I highlighted it in red. It's not all that big of a change, but I thought it might be good for you folks to at least see that we broke out a section on insurance and medical care, because it is, as a section in the handbook, it's important, but we never had a headline to insurance and medical care. I think we should do that going forward.
If we go by the user fees and settling.
The user fees are staying the same, so yeah, they're in there, but they still exist, but they're not increasing for next year. So, and I think
That's it.
that may be it.
The rest of this, most of the rest of it is really school district and school committee
School
policy.
committee adopted policies, a
Right.
few of them were new for last year.
Right.
So I think that's my, those are my proposed changes for you, for all of you.
As you're aware of,
Okay, okay. That's right.
as you're aware, we're discussing the policy related to participation in extracurricular activities and athletics. And we haven't reached a conclusion or a second reading on that yet, and I'm sure we won't tonight.
Right.
But you need to perhaps be aware that that's hanging out there, and you might want to make some modifications associated with that.
You said a month. We should get to it, I would think, hopefully at the next
I
meeting.
would think.
We need to get to it at the
Right.
next meeting.
Yeah. So, in fact, you might want to, I'm sure the first thing you're thinking of, John, is, gee, school ends on the 23rd. I'd love to come to school committee on the 28th.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, you have to be there. It's your farewell.
I actually,
That's
I
right.
don't think I'm here.
All right. Well, perhaps prior to that, maybe you can meet with the policy committee, subcommittee, or, but we've gotten, we had discussed
Yeah.
discussed changes. I think you had been involved. You had talked to, I think, Mr. Bowers and and Keith, right, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson. And we asked for some input. We're getting input now from our attorney, from the MIAA. We've got to kind of digest all that and then come back and look at the policies. So, I don't think you have to be here, but.
Is there anything you would like from me tonight on
Well, I think the main thing, the two main issues, if I recall correctly, we're looking at is making the penalties more harsh, mainly on a third, I would say a third violation, right? First and second is pretty much the same, although we
The
suggest,
penalties are the same.
right, one of the things we're doing in the first and second is
it? Yes.
having the student evaluated for potential whether they need counseling or whatever.
Mhm.
The other issue is the third, much harsher penalty on the third violation by a student. And also,
Talking about year-round.
year-round rather than just when in school. And I haven't read the response from our attorney on what kind of jurisdiction do we have, if a kid gets caught doing something in the summer, do we have jurisdiction to say you can't play sports for the first quarter of the season or whatever? And the other one was a more serious penalty for students who are arrested for driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Those were the main,
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of other things, but I think those are the main ones, right?
Yeah, those are the main ones. So the all year round, we're not looking for you to go out and police people,
Right.
police the students during the summertime, but in the event that there is an event in the summer that students are involved in that, comes to the attention of the school
Mhm.
the first of the year, then those events would apply to the students in September. And then the other harsh penalty for driving while involved with a chemical substance, that one try to make the penalty much harsher on that, or hopefully with some inhibition of that. I think those are the ones that were
Sure.
still out there,
Mhm.
hanging around. We haven't come to conclusions on. I think the
Okay.
other things that we've come to some resolution on.
And there was much discussion in the committee and a lot of requests for additional information. As I
Mhm.
think we need to, Dr. Manville's provided us some input from the MIAA, and we've got tonight input from our school committee council on some of the questions I haven't read yet.
My major sticking point is it doesn't address the students that aren't involved
Right, and that's an
in
issue we'll have.
activity.
Right.
Well, and I think that is a good, and I don't know how much you want to talk about this tonight. If you don't, just tell me.
Then we talk about it
I
for,
would love to
you're
hear
here, so we
what
can.
about that. Part of my thinking was, with the increase in the penalty for all students, you know, with that minimum 6-day external suspension, that is more all-encompassing. It's been my experience, and it affects, unfortunately, when it does come up, it would affect any student regardless of their participation in athletics or extracurricular activities, and I think that's to your point. I think, my personal opinion is I think the MIAA policy is sufficient. I think the school-based penalty has not been. And that's why I was recommending to all of you that the 6-day external suspension be increased.
And 10
Be
days
in
for drugs, has it always been 10 days for drugs?
I'm gonna say yes, yeah. I mean, I've had,
Since you've been here?
yeah, I've dealt with a couple, and yeah, it's been a 10-day, or an expulsion hearing, yeah.
Anywhere from 3 to 6 for.
I'm asking you for that, yeah.
Right.
Oh, you voted, I guess,
Right.
that tonight, yeah.
Well, we haven't
I-
voted, we haven't voted yet.
Oh, you didn't vote the handbook yet?
We haven't voted
Okay.
yet,
No,
but
that,
I favor that. so.
I think that personally, that's my opinion, I think it's the appropriate way to go. My experience with students that I've had to deal with on alcohol violations and their parents is that the belief is that it's a 3-day suspension and that really isn't a big deal, so to speak. And I don't mean to overstate it, but that's essentially what I get. It's said to me very respectfully, but it's like, we'll run the risk, and that's kind of the attitude. But I think we start talking now about 6 days unexcused absence from school. That's 3 days of class for each of your, each cycle of 2 days. I think that's a 6-day suspension that's a big deal at our school. That's a big deal. 3 days is a big deal. 6, that's an eye opener. That I think, causes people to stop and think about, the whole academic piece. There's the college application piece. I think we're bringing it, and it would be my intention to speak very pointedly about that in the fall with each of the 4 classes, as I think I've done in the past, or thought I had done in the past. But I would be willing to do that more. I think some of the issues, and I know Mr. Bowers had included me in some of the discussion by email on his proposal, and I 100% respect where you're coming from on it and what you're trying to accomplish with it. My personal opinion is that I think it opens up a can of worms that I don't think we can put back into the can.
Mike, my issue is, those policies only address on-premise, correct?
Or at a school-sponsored activity.
But what about, so his policy also addresses off-premise.
Well,
So
any
there's a little
student-
gap there. So say you're at a party, or you're driving in a car.
No, that's still true too.
It is.
For athletics and extracurricular activities.
Right, but not for suspension, and we
But not
have
for
no,
suspension.
we have no
Oh, no, that wouldn't
jurisdiction
be the
over
case
that,
here.
right?
Right,
We can't,
that wouldn't be the case
No.
either.
we
No.
can't, we have no jurisdiction
So
over
I
that,
think
correct?
what Cliff is trying to do is fill that gap.
That if you're at a party on the weekend, you could be suspended from school?
Well, no, but harsher action than the standard MIAA piece.
Yes. No, I
So-
respect.
And I do
where he's
understand where he's coming from. So there's a gap there, where you're not on premise or at a school activity, and you are running afoul or behind the wheel type of thing. So
Well,
I
see,
do
that-
understand
Well, you
where-
would still pay, there is still a penalty for that. I think what Mr. Bowers is proposing is that penalty be harsher. That penalty still
Yeah,
exists.
yeah.
If you're an athlete or an extracurricular.
No, I
activity,
understand.
Right.
I think it's gonna.
But I think one of the things, I disagree with some of what Mr. Bowers proposed, agree with other. The thing that's always made me scratch my head is this, if you do something wrong over a 9-month period, you're in trouble, but if you do something in the summer, more power to you. Especially for the athletes and the kids involved in
I think that's where
extracurricular.
the parent role comes in. The parent is the supervisor,
No, I understand that,
over the
but,
summer
but
has the
we
obligation
can't, we can't penalize the student coming back to school in September,
Right,
That's correct.
you can't.
You cannot.
as the policy
Well,
stands
right now
now.
is the policy.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know you haven't had a chance to read Nancy's summary.
Right.
But John and I talked about it a little bit. And basically what she says is, there's nothing that prevents you from doing this. If you want to do it, there's no law that says you can't. There's no law that says you can, but it's silent on it. She does a very nice breakdown of everything, and in the end she says, why do you want to do it? Do you want to be first? Do you want to be the school district that has to take the brunt of all the precedent-setting legal issues? Because the one thing, speaking to what you were saying, is an issue of fairness. You know, why is my kid being penalized when that kid isn't being penalized? That's not fair, and I'm gonna get an injunction and off we go. But basically, the way I read it, and I talked to her very briefly, is there's nothing stopping you, no legal reason that you can't do what you wanna do. You know,